So we're starting this next session, breakout session, and this particular one is called Fireside Chat, Convergence of Cloud, Social, and Mobile. I remember his question, what's a fireside chat? I know a fireside chat for me was when I got in trouble and I sat, my father said, please come sit down, we got things to talk about. So I hope this will be a bit more, less threatening than that one was.
No, you're in trouble.
Okay, so we'd like to introduce Harvey Capel. Most of you know him already, president of Pictographics. Raj Patil, CEO of Aspark and president and COO of Liquid Hub. And Sasi Pillay, CIO, University of Wisconsin, and the former CIO of NASA's Glenn Research Center, all of whom are veterans of this forum for many, many years. So over to you guys. You've got 40 minutes.
40.
Okay.
It's getting shorter.
All right. Well, this is a fireside chat, as you heard. The fireplace is over there. Unfortunately, no brandy, no cognac. So we ask you to use your imagination. Three of us will be introducing our respective topics and then opening up for discussion with each topic, and then at the end for general Q&A. We flipped a coin earlier to see who would speak first, second, and third. Raj picked heads, Sasi picked tails. There were only two sides to the coin, so I had no side. I got to go first. So here we go. My topic is social of the list of topics. And I wanted to start off actually by thanking the conference organizers for actually labeling this social. If you look at your conference guide, the theme is referred to as Reinventing Global Sourcing, Cloud, Mobile, and Social. I think this may be the first time that I've seen in print social without any suffix. So there's no like social studies or social media or social networking. And I think this is sort of an important point, because what really is I think happening, and what we're starting to see being embraced, is business really happening in a social context. And I think what a good descriptor would be, at least for this conversation, would be to refer to social in the context of social business networks. You know, we all are very, very familiar with sites like LinkedIn on the business side, Facebook or Twitter, more on the personal or individual side. But more and more, business is starting to be conducted through these business networks. Some of them are open, like a LinkedIn. Some of them are quite closed and specialized, so you see networks for CEOs or CIOs or CFOs or CMOs or horizontal or in vertical industries such as financial services or automotive. We've heard a number of vertical conversations already today. What I would suggest is a way to think about the trend and what's really going on. We've heard about the consumerization of IT, and everybody knows about bring your own device, and how people are starting to, in fact, bring their own applications. And really what we see with social, in this, certainly in the context of social business networks, is what I would call the consumerization of business people. So it's a very interesting thought if you put it in that context, because more and more business people are starting to conduct themselves in ways that we would have thought of even 2 or 3 years ago as interpersonal or consumer-like behaviors. Another way, I think, to think about what's happening, and I think what's driving a lot of this, is if you take the old phrase, and I don't even know how old it is, probably older than most of us in this room, this notion of anything, anytime, anywhere, which probably was very popularized when the internet first came on the scene. What I propose we do is add a fourth noun to that phrase, and I think what we're seeing now is anything, anytime, anywhere, and anyone. And one of the things that's very characteristic of social in the business network field is the ability to reach out and find an expert or somebody to chat with on an informal basis or on a formal basis around a strategy, around a problem, around a tactic, whatever the topic may be. But more and more day-to-day business is being conducted in that way. A couple of other key dynamics, and then we'll open this up for conversation. These social or business networks tend to level the playing field in many ways. An interesting dynamic, you see competitors helping competitors, something that, again, even 3 or 4 years ago, unthinkable. In one of my past lives, I co-founded with IBM a group called the Center for CIO Leadership, which was essentially a business network for CIOs. Once there was a basic community of interest established, we saw relationships established. I reference now one of Bepe's slides. We saw trust established. It was amazing to listen to and watch the dialogue that happened between CIOs of competitive organizations. And they may have been competitive directly, as in the case of a JP Morgan Chase or a Citi, or maybe perhaps indirectly, as in the case of a regional bank from one area talking to a regional bank of another area, different countries. And it was very clear that people had a common interest. They shared common problems and were very willing to discuss common solutions in a non-threatening, very non-competitive way. The other major trend that's happening is customers are in the middle of all of this. So it's leveling the playing field in a different way, where used to be the seller was the one with the power. I have the product, I know about the product, I'm the specialist in the product and know everything there is to know. I'm going to sell it to you, I'm going to tell you the things I think are important to you. And the onus of doing the evaluation, doing the selection, making the decision is up to you as the buyer. And in fact, we've heard terms like let the buyer beware as a good indication of that way of doing business. I think what's happening now with these business networks is that balance of power has switched, where customers routinely talk to each other. And I think this is happening at the consumer level as well as at the business level. More and more information, the information about the products and services is now widespread, generally available, no longer a base of power for the people that are doing the selling. And in fact, not only can you easily access the information about products and services, but you can have direct access to people that are using the products and services and getting feedback as to what works, what doesn't work, who's good, who's not good. So this whole notion of let the buyer beware, I think in some cases is already starting to indicate perhaps let the seller beware as a change in focus. The last point I'll make in this section is actually provide what I think is a really interesting example of how this all comes together. And we will be talking about big data and analytics and cloud and other parts of this. But this example, I think, brings all of this together in a very neat way. So anybody here into junk food? Nobody raised their hand. Okay, good. That's good. We got one. Okay, good. So, Jim. Jim. Good to see we've got one. So, you're probably familiar with Frito-Lay's, which is a Pepsi brand, Pepsi company. A couple of years ago, actually, they initiated a social collaboration with their customers around coming up with the next flavor for Frito-Lay potato chips. You may or may not have seen this, but it was really, at first it was an experiment. It was a totally different way of doing things. In fact, I mean, in classical terms, you think about it as a different business model, right? This was not the classic market research and go out and do the focus groups and do the taste tests and do all this stuff, and several $1 million in months or years later you come up with 1 or 2 or 3 interesting ideas and you place your bet and you're either right or wrong and you either make a lot of money or you don't. So what Frito-Lay did was they created with their customer base a contest to see who could submit the best idea for the next flavor of Frito-Lay's potato chips. The prize, by the way, was $1 million, or I think it was like 1 or 2% of the next year's sale of the flavor, whichever was greater. Okay, so customers were really incented to submit flavors, and they were getting all kinds of wild suggestions. And Cajun chicken, I think, was one of the flavors, and Canadian raccoon, or whatever they were, but that's not really the point. Within a few months, and by the way, voting was done via Twitter, was done via text message, was done via LinkedIn, was done via email, every conceivable channel of social media in this business context. And ultimately, I think it was Cajun chicken that won. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that this was something that was conducted over a couple of months as opposed to 9 months or a year. I'm sure it cost some money, but nothing like the millions of dollars that a typical campaign would take. The goodwill that was created with the customer base was second to none. The market was pre-established, so the risk associated with placing the big bet on some wild exotic flavor was tremendously mitigated by the fact that the customers themselves had voted for this flavor, and ultimately they released it, and has been a huge success, by the way. This is now, I think, the second year that Pepsi and Frito-Lay has now done this same model to really influence their product direction. So it's a very interesting way, I think, of this sort of social phenomena bringing together business and personal use of the internet and cloud and all the things we're going to talk about. So before I pass the microphone to my colleagues here, any question or discussion about any of the points so far? Other than you hate Frito-Lays, which... Okay,
Right.
in that case, so...
Sure.
Sure.
Clay, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Seth.
I mean, you reminded me about that. I actually entered in that contest. My entry was a jalapeno-laden Fritos. Unfortunately, it didn't win. But I think that is a great example of crowdsourcing. And in my previous job as a CTO for NASA, we did precisely that. In a matter of 48 hours, we engaged over 100 cities around the world, working on 50 different problems. And we got well over 100 solutions. And many of them actually exceeded the original requirements that we had set out in terms of a problem statement. And it basically saved NASA close to $15 to $18 million for a period of 48 hours. So it's something that I think there's a talk later today talking about crowdsourcing as another methodology. But I guess the topic that I'm supposed to talk about today is cloud and big data. Now I'll start off with the cloud. Let me ask a question here. How many of you in the audience are IT service providers or provide services to your customers either directly or indirectly? And how many of you actually lowered the cost to your customers in the last year?
I don't see any hands.
Well, I think it's this. And it was sort of a 10 to 2 hand. And how many times did you do that? Once, twice, half a dozen times, or 24 times? Once only. Well, there are many cloud providers out there who have reduced the cost to the customer over many times in the same year. In fact, since its inception, 24 times. I think none of us could come even close to that. So my question to all of us is, why are we not all in the cloud yet? Because it is definitely cost savings. So the question is, either we are reluctant to go there because we are afraid of the risk, or we have not done the assessment properly. So what I would encourage all of us to do is really seriously consider using cloud as one of the methods of providing services to our customers. So you have to assess the risk in terms of reliability, availability, the scalability of it, and of course security. In fact, quite often when I have done this analysis, one of the things that people always talk about, well, the cloud environment is not secure. Actually, I find the cloud environment is to be far more secure than we have provided ourselves to our own customers. If I want to have armed guards protecting my data center, In a cloud environment, I can do that. If I want a private tenancy, I can do that. If I want multiple tenancy, I can do that. None of those options are really not available to me for self-provisioning these things to my customers today. So I think if we can do an honest approach to how we can use cloud as one of the sources by which we can provide and integrate our services to customers, we should be jumping on that. And the other thing is that if you can do some of these things, again, we are only shifting the responsibility, but we are not shifting our accountability. You're still accountable for the services that through a third party you might provision to our customers. But the opportunity in terms of time to market is significantly improved. The opportunity to make sure the security patches are applied in a timely manner is improved. The issue of continuity of operations and disaster recovery is improved. And I can go on and on and on. So my point to all of you is if we have not analyzed using cloud as one of the methodologies by which you can provision services, you should start today. But you should do it in a methodical and organized manner. So let me talk about how we can go about doing that. One of the first things we need to establish governance is as like everything else. The things that revolve about what we provision is basically the three axes, technology, process, and people. To me, technology is the easiest piece. It's the process and people that's hard. And in order to get a handle on that, you have to have a governance structure by which we can methodically analyze these options. And then the environment consists of not only a private cloud, but also a public cloud and hybrid. And what I would recommend for people who are getting started is to start with a hybrid approach. You still your data center, your capacity and capability. You start there and you slowly extend that by bringing in additional capacity. So what I would suggest is don't buy any more capacity for your data center. That additional data center capacity or capability that you need should be provided in the cloud. And then we should be focusing on more about identity management so that your end users can seamlessly transition from your provision services at your local data center to a remote capability, wherever that happens to be. And you can specify that. It has to be within this country or within a certain zone of the country and so on and so forth. All that is available to you as control levers when you engage a cloud vendor. Then the other thing is security and privacy, and I talked a little bit about that, that I think many of the cloud vendors actually offer a better capability. So what we need to do is to have some sort of SLAs and legal documents that provision you to understand how best to make these things happen. And you also have to look at the other thing you need to worry about is switching costs. You should also have the flexibility and the freedom and ease of switching from cloud vendor A to B to C or whatever that happens to be. So we should be able to look at cloud, the capacity in the cloud really as a commodity. It's volume of business that you can provide, that you can get and access to. And there are, of course, several sources, infrastructure and as a service and platform and software. And quite often when you look at it, like email, how many of you are able to run or have looked at email as a cloud provisioned service? Anybody looked at that? You're from Microsoft, that doesn't count. So anyone else? Good, okay. To me, like when you look at IT and many of the things that we do, they are basic necessities of running a business. None of them are competitive. Who thinks IT is a competitive advantage?
Microsoft.
And if you think IT is a competitive advantage, how long are you able to sustain it unless you're not innovating on the margins? Almost anything that I can come up with a competitive advantage today, in a couple of years, everybody else is doing the same thing. So unless you're innovative about your IT portfolio, IT is never a competitive advantage. It's one of those necessary evils that you got to have because you need email, right? You need data storage. You need all these things to run an ongoing concern. But they're never ever a competitive advantage that will sustain you for the long run unless you're continuing to innovate. And my point is that if you embrace the cloud technologies, it gives you and your staff ample time to innovate around your business. Because now the outcome is not just satisfying your customers to survive, you really have to change the industry in which you're in to be able to sustain. I mean, look what happened to the music industry and the publishing industry. It's not just satisfying your immediate customers, your ability to influence the industry that is going to be sustainable. So let me just stop there and allow Raj to continue that.
Great, thanks, Sasi. So I'll pick up the topic on mobile, and then we'll come back and talk about the Confluence, right? A few years ago, 2-3 years ago, we were talking about it as a trend, and of course we are way beyond that. Right? It's no more a trend, it's reality of how business is done. So what does that really mean, right? It's moved beyond a trend, it's become way to go to new markets, get new customers, better way of interacting with customers. So there's a whole new interaction model that's getting created because of mobile. And markets, there are certain markets where it's mobile only, emerging markets where they go to India, China, they just completely leapfrogged and skipped a step, and it's mobile. So what is a big deal? One is, as Harvey said, is the ability to do anywhere commerce and interact, right? But it's really what mobile gives is more than that. It is about context, relevance, insight is really what is driving it, right? So one is, I can be on the go, it's an obvious to this audience, but really to provide that contextual, relevant experience with insight. That's what gets commerce going, that's what gets better interaction with the clients, customers, etc. So in order to do that, it is not only about mobile, it is about the Confluence. How do you get context? How do you give relevance? How do you develop insight? It's then about data, then it's where does the data sit, how do I analyze it? So it's really about the Confluence in order to create this experience or these new ways of doing commerce as opposed to just a channel. Interestingly, from where I come, and I talk to a lot of companies, there are broadly three kinds of IC, now that we're in the third wave of doing this. One is there are totally new, disruptive companies, Uber as an example, that completely has changed an industry. That's one set of problems using this technology. Then there are the large companies that say, look, I've got the money, I'm going to put an innovation group, and I'm going to go build all this stuff, spend millions of dollars. That's the second category. Third is the mid-sized ones that are stuck. They're saying, I'm competing in the same markets. I don't have the necessary dollars. I don't have the skill set. Innovation is key. All these days, innovation was being driven from the enterprise, but now it's from the consumer side. How do I bring that innovation in? So each one of them have a different set of problems that they're dealing with in order to truly bring this to use this or leverage the power of this. And hence, I think we keep going back to, that's great, I'm going to build all this fancy stuff, but how does it work with my backend? How do I keep it seamless between my different channels of interaction? So those are the kind of problems that I think to solve that's when you start thinking of cloud. That's when you start thinking of, do I have the data in the right place? We all talk about analytics. Let me tell you, the people here from large companies, half, I would say 80%, they say big data, I got it, but I don't even have it in one place. What am I going to do big data analytics on? So get it in one place, or get it in a form that I can do something with it. So there are those basic plumbing issues still there. And hence, I think some of these new paradigms allow for companies to go there and be able to enter these new markets. So I see this as a confluence. Mobile is just now, given we're in the third wave of it, it's no more just fancy apps, it's about real business.
Okay, you want
Want to open it up for questions?
to talk a little bit about predictive analytics?
Oh, right, sorry.
Okay, so let me just follow on Raj's thesis about big data and predictive analytics. If you really look at most of the organizations, we have a ton of data already. The problem is we just don't know what we have. For the same reasons that Raj alluded to, the fact that it's not organized, it's all over the place, and in my opinion, the data itself is not very reliable. So if you look at the context of data, there's a tremendous amount of volume, there's a tremendous amount of variety, a tremendous amount of velocity because the amount, the width, the speed at which we're accumulating the data is enormous. But the most critical problem we have is veracity. We just don't know how accurate the data is. So there again, we have to establish some sort of a governance process within our organization which makes sure there is some sort of a data cleansing operation going on, because otherwise it's garbage in and garbage out. We have volumes of data that we keep track of, which in my opinion, we just don't know whether the usefulness of it. And then the true value comes in, like Harvey and Raj talked about, is a confluence. So it's integrating these multiple domains. So when you're talking about multiple integrating, it's just like in most new discoveries are happening not isolated in individual fields because of the interdisciplinary approach. The same thing here. The new discoveries in terms of data mining and predictive analytics comes about by integrating multiple domains. So when you're talking about integrating across multiple domains, I'm talking about both structured data and unstructured data that comes from the social medium. So it's not just rows and columns that we have to look at, but also based on sentiment analysis and contextual analysis as well, that actually improves and significantly creates the underlying meaning of what we are talking about. So in order to be able to do that, you have to establish some methodology by which people have ownership for this data, and at the same time being able to willing to share it. Quite often you have in organizations in which not only the systems are siloed, but worse, even the data and access to it is siloed, instead of making it available completely across the enterprise. So how do we why are we interested in the data? If you look at just a simple thing about analyzing the number of clicks that goes on a web page before somebody orders it, do you have any idea what percentage of people who browse websites actually place orders?
No ideas.
No ideas, okay. It's less than 2%. You know, it's a very small fraction of the people who come to your website actually place orders, but still you have companies like Dell and others who make millions of dollars per minute by use of the web. So it behooves us to understand simply even the behavior of how people traverse your website to understand how do we take window shopping into really a sale. And so there's a lot to be gained in terms of doing these analytics to be able to improve. Even if you just can double from 2% to 4%, it's huge in terms of the return on your investment. So the whole idea is to be able to do that. Now, talking about confluence of all these mediums or this, I would say these domains, it's about some companies are beginning to offer, when you're driving through a neighborhood, basically you get a notification saying there's a sale at Foot Lockers. And since they know all about you, they know exactly the type of pair of shoes you're looking for. So if you walk into the store within the next 30 minutes, we'll give you a 50% discount on the shoes that you were browsing all these last few months about the availability of that. The whole idea is through mobile devices, through early notification, knowing your behavior, analyzing through big data, immediately providing you an opportunity for consummating a sale. Just imagine how much you can drive business that way when you're able to react real time about your presence, using your mobile device, knowing your background, and then giving you an opportunity to consummate a sale.
Yeah, a couple of comments here. This really gets to what Marv Adams earlier this morning was talking about, a segment of one. So this offer is something that is targeted directly to you based on company's understanding of who you are, what your needs are, where you are in time and space at the particular moment. And the other thing that is happening trend-wise is, to continue with the Foot Locker example, not only will they know if you responded positively to that offer that they sent you via text message, they certainly will know if you didn't respond, but they will also know if you went to a competitive store, if you went to Stride Rite, or I don't even know names of other shoe stores, but they will be able to tell that you bought those shoes somewhere else as opposed to Foot Locker. So that, what used to be an art is rapidly becoming a science, and I think that's something that we need to really appreciate and the value of.
And the beauty is that then you decided you're going to park your car and walk into Foot Locker and make use of this great deal because you've been kind of looking over this opportunity to buy these pair of shoes for quite some time. And the beauty about it, you walk into the store, you just pick up the pair of shoes and walk out. There is no reason to stand in line or anything, because they know as soon as you got in the store, you were there. And since you have already have a relationship about your account and everything, basically the reduction of the inventory associated with your presence in the store actually consummates the sale. You basically go pick it up and walk out of the store. There's no you don't even have to stand in line.
Yep.
There is no cashier involved here. It's all completely seamless. So that's the kind of direction that all of us need to think about, which I started off saying earlier. It's not just improving your customer satisfaction. It's really changing the industry, how services are delivered to your end customers. That's where we need to be thinking about. It's not just satisfying your immediate customer, improving on the margins a few percentage at a time. No, that is not a sustainable business operation. So that's the challenge before us. To take a look at all these opportunities, kind of rewrite how we want to deliver these services.
Okay, did we provoke any other questions or comments in the midst of all of this? Jim?
I don't know, I never look at any threat as a threat. It's really another opportunity. I think we need to take all these things as really a challenge to think and rewrite how business processes happen. You're absolutely right. The less inventory you can maintain, the better off you are. So the whole question is, and if you look at human behavior, we might take months to decide on which product to buy, but as soon as you decide which product you wanted that yesterday.
Want it now.
It's almost like we have to predict your mind in terms of ESP. Oh, you're going to buy this. You're close to making...
Amazon is doing that.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
So the point is, how do we try to give you some idea about how the predictive algorithm in your mind is working? That can only happen by analyzing human behavior based on your past experiences. But going back to your model, from a customer's perspective, they don't really care about where they're getting the product from, as long as they get the product they're interested in, right? It's the rest of us who have to manage that environment that is sort of struggling, right? So the point there is that once you walk into that store, then you have an opportunity to sell that individual something else.
And this, I think, gets back to...
So that's where I would pick up on that. Okay, we cannot sell you that, but we can give you equivalent or a better product, even at a reduced price. Now, are you able to change that mindset?
Right, and this, I think, Jim, gets back to the customer in charge and empowering the customer that I was talking about earlier. Nike, by the way, for those of you that may not be familiar with $300 sneakers, on their website has absolutely mastered the art and science of mass customization. So you can go on Nike's website and say, that's the basic model shoe that I want, but I want the soles to be orange made out of rubber, and I want the inner sole to be blue made out of leather, and I want the swoosh to be yellow, and I want this color lace, and literally they will produce that sneaker for you to your custom specification, which frankly unheard of in the world of retail manufacturing. But this is because, and you hinted at it, I think, in your comment, that Nike has focused on their brand almost exclusively. And they figured out a long time ago that the manufacturing and distribution is what we've been calling the commodity or near commodity part of their supply chain. So it's all about their brand, which drives people to their site or drives people to Foot Locker if that's where it's available. But a very different business process model than most retailers. I think one of the future.
And then I'd just like to add one comment to that. I think your comment about will retail change, right? I mean, is it a threat? What we're seeing, at least what I see, is it's all going to come down to building that relationship with the customer, whether they're picking it up from the store, picking it up on. It's the opportunity to start a relationship and continue building that relationship. Right? If you look at all our buying behavior, we'll do all of this customization, etc. End of the day, I think there are enough studies that say, look, I'll buy from a place where I'm continuing to build that relationship for a long time. So I think that's how these retailers should be thinking. I can come pick up the shoe, but can I then build a relationship with the customer for a long time? Other services, on and on and on. So,
Jerry. We have a mic on here, please.
IT and business or IT non-IT, it doesn't matter what technology you have, it just isn't going to work.
So can I just,
Please.
And that's an excellent point, because remember I said sometimes we're so consumed in the day-to-day of running our IT, we don't pay attention to the opportunities that you're talking about. So that's why I think some of these things regarding cloud providers and so on and so forth gives you an opportunity to free up your IT staff to think more broadly. For example, sometimes the only way to convince your business partners is to show by example. And let's face it, we can actually now test market many things simultaneously, globally, very different endpoints, so fast right now. So, and you can actually see the sales in each of these regions significantly grow or diminish. And those facts are real. And we can do this, what I would call using the global marketplace as a laboratory to evaluate various different choices of your current product line. And that is so self-evident because the data will speak for itself. For example, Amazon continuously, they don't go through these focus groups and so on and so forth. Every time you're buying a product, and the product that you buy is different than Harvey buys in New York that I buy it on the West Coast. And the way they're able to customize it is because each region they're trying to find out which sells better in a particular region. But some of those kinds of what I would call real-time opportunities, we can make the IT folks in the house can partner with the business to deliver. And so we have to earn the business partners, in my mind, their trust, and we can show some of these examples. Another example is how do we, instead of just having a simple old picture on your website to show off your product. I don't know if you know about augmented reality. Augmented reality gives you a great mechanism by which you can actually provide three-dimensional view of your product, and the customer can actually interact. It's not just rotating the device, it's actually getting into it and then almost like a sort of pseudo-immersive type of technology. These are simple things that we can just immediately deploy and get, I would say, improve our credibility with our business partners. We have to show them what is feasible. And I think that's the value-added component the IT group can provide.
well, I'd like to add to that. One is to show, but I'll say it the way, I think IT has to get on with the program now, right? It's not about sitting there and I think Jim, in your opening remarks, you spoke about the timelines, right? 18 months to 4 months. It's probably 4 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you manage that and ability to step up and play that as opposed to, give me your needs, I'll go do a assessment and we'll come back, we'll figure out who's going to do it. And that has to change. And on the other side, business has to realize what can and can't be done. So I agree with Sasi on showing it, but got to separate the run the engine versus building some of these new things. So IT is to get on with the program.
Well, I think at the end of the day, there needs to be a much bigger overlap in the thought processes between business and IT.
Right.
Bottom line. IT people need to learn much more about the business and what makes it tick, and the business people, as Raj was saying, need to understand not about whether it should be 128-bit or 256-bit encryption, but they need to understand the value of technology, what it can and cannot do, and what it can return. It's kind of an interesting acid test, again, going back to my Center for CIO Leadership experience. We used to essentially work at helping CIOs make the journey, as we described it, from the old world manager of the IT cost center focused on process efficiency and saving cost into this new world we're talking about, which is the fully business aligned IT business partnership. We called that the business savvy CIO. And people used to ask me all the time, well, how do I know when I got to be a business savvy CIO? What's the checkbox that I need to check off, is there a certification or a degree or a course or a form I fill out, or what is it that establishes me in this sort of austere realm of business savvy CIO? And the answer that I found was the most effective was actually the most simple, which was when you, as an IT executive, get invited to a business strategy planning session, not because you have a C in your title, but because those people in the room believe you're going to add value to that conversation, invite you, then you know you're a business savvy CIO. And that's, I think, what we all need to strive for.
Yeah. I mean, I think quite often when a CIO gets invited to these board level meetings and they're not asking about IT, they're actually asking about how we can grow the business. That's when I know that CIO has arrived.
Yeah, I make a good part of my living advising boards, which sounds very sexy, right? In reality, what it looks and sounds and feels like is I go to a board meeting where the CIO presents to the board, the CIO leaves the room, and the board members look at me and say, "What did he say? What does that mean? What questions should we be asking next?" And it's basically because the CIO is speaking in language that the board doesn't understand, and the other way around, I might add. The board is speaking in language that the CIO doesn't understand. And I'm frankly sorry to say I make a very nice living at translating between the two. And I'm sorry that that need exists. I would much rather, frankly, live in a world where that service wasn't needed. And I'd gladly move on to the next one. But that is the world we live in. That must have provoked something. I know we're between lunch and you guys, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.